welcome to the Tea and the Butty podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
Today's episode is about Sean Connery, who sadly left us at 90 years old on Saturday.
Yeah, we had something else planned for today, but Dominic is a huge Sean Connery fan.
Connery, yeah.
We didn't really see a way around doing this episode.
Yeah, we had to do it. I had to do it. I had to talk about him, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here we go.
We're talking all about Sean Connery.
I'm sure you guys are into Sean Connery as well. He was in so many things.
He was in so many films, yeah.
Even if you weren't like a James Bond person, then you were bound to have seen him in something else.
He was... Someone said it, he was the UK's greatest film star. He was Britain's greatest film star. And I believe that. Yeah, I think that. I can't think of anyone else. Charlie Chaplin maybe, but really he was kind of American by the end of it all, you know.
Was he?
Everybody thinks he's American. Sean Connery, you couldn't get away from the fact that the man was Scottish. He had Scotland Forever tattooed on his...
Did he really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
On his arms, yeah, he had it done in the Navy. Anyway, he was born in 1930.
Yeah.
And he was born in Fountain Bridge in Edinburgh, in Scotland, which has been largely, redeveloped today.
Yeah.
I think he came back in 2010 to, unveil a plaque or something, saying this is where I was born.
Say, they renamed the place Sean Connery Land.
Well, they may do after this now. They may do, and I wouldn't blame them. The greatest living Scot, he was known as,
Yeah.
And his name was Thomas Sean Connery.
Oh.
Yeah, his first name was, and he was called Tommy in his youth,
Yeah.
And, because he was quite a small child, and then he, by the time he was 18, he'd grow into his full height of 6'2", so he was known as Big Tam. Big Tam. Aye, Big Tam. Yeah. No Big Tam. He lives up in Edinburgh. Aye, Big Tam. So, but he had how he got his name. He said, oh no, I was using the name Sean Connery before I was acting, because when actors start to act, they have to change their name because there's another Sean Connery out there, eking out his living on the register, Yeah. And he says, no, I had an Irish friend called Seamus.
Oh yeah.
Who, when we get around his friends, they call me Sean because it's an Irish name. It's Irish for John, I think, actually, isn't it? Yeah. Which is why John Lennon named Sean Lennon Sean, because it's Irish for John.
Maybe, yeah.
But yeah, he had that, and he was, but he was known Big Tam, because he was muscly and everything. And there's the famous story is he grew up in poverty in one room house with a shared toilet and and bathroom and whatever, in a tenement in Edinburgh, and he was a milkman. That's how he earned. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, he was a milkman.
God, I'm gonna have to get a biography about Sean Connery. I don't really know that much about his life.
He was. He had a younger brother called Neil, who was an actor, but really he wasn't. It was
is he still alive?
He's still alive, as far as I know. Nothing really is. He's kept very under the radar since his spaghetti Italian spy film OK Connery came out in the 60s.
OK Connery?
It was to capitalize on the success of the Bond franchise.
Oh,
and
God.
It's Operation Kid Brother, and it starred many of the people who were in the James Bond films, Bernard Lee, Louis Maxwell. It was made by an Italian company, so they were mad for James Bond back then. So they were we got to make this, and of course, it's okay because we've got James Bond's younger brother.
Oh God!
And it was pretty terrible. I've seen clips of it and stuff, and it was just like a spoof. His first job was like a milkman, and he was delivering milk around Edinburgh, and apparently one of his deliveries was to Fetus, or Fates, I think it's called. It's like the Scottish version of Eton.
Oh.
And apparently that's where James Bond in the stories went. Spent a, after there was an incident in Eton, he went to school in Scotland. He went to this, so it was like that. There's that connection again. And when he came back in 2009, he said, I was in the taxi going around Edinburgh, and the taxi was, when I took a taxi during a recent Edinburgh Film Festival, the driver was amazed that I could put a name to every street we passed. How come, he asked. As a boy, I used to deliver milk round here. I said, so what do you do now? That was rather harder to answer. It's like, how do you know? A taxi driver doesn't know he's got Sean Connery in the back of his car,
Well, I guess
How do you know? Did you grow up around here?
You would be thrown for a loop, though. Plus, he's a little old man already in 2009,
He still looked like Sean Connery in 2009.
I mean, you wouldn't expect Sean Connery to be taking
his little golfing cap and everything, and he looked like. But taking a taxi was, it's just kind of like you just know it's him. I don't know. It's like you don't have to be James Bond fans or even a film fan to know. Oh, that's Sean Connery.
Yeah.
The greatest living Scot. Yeah. In when he was around 16, he joined the Navy. And that's where he got his tattoos.
Oh, yeah.
Mum and Dad in Scotland forever.
Scotland forever.
But he was discharged at 19 on medical grounds because of an intestinal ulcer or something he had. So I think it was kind of like national service he did.
Yeah.
Or something. But then, around that same time, he became interested in bodybuilding.
Oh, yeah.
And his website says he placed third in the Mr. Universe contest from 1950, but there's other people who say no, it was 1953.
Okay.
And he was, because he was doing, because there's a lot of those old, like before they were famous photos of him going around, where he's doing the poses and all that, and he kind of got disinterested in it around that time because he was kind of into everything. He was playing football as well. And apparently Matt Busby, who was then manager of Manchester United, saw him, and it was while touring for when he was becoming an actor. He was doing a tour of South Pacific.
Oh yeah.
He was in one of those like tours around the country or whatever. He was like, it was a small role. It was on, the stage and everything.
Yeah.
Matt Busby saw him when he was playing against a local team or something. Apparently he happened to be there scouting, and he offered Connery a contract, and he turned it down. It was like 25.
It's hilarious though, because so much of these people from
back then, it was just kind of like
they were totally just spotted and scouted because they were attractive, right? It's like, oh, I can't act. What do you mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, don't worry about that.
I think the South Pacific thing. There was a bodybuilding competition going on at this theatre in Edinburgh, and they said, oh, they're looking for people to play a small role in this production. You should go along and do it. You'd be perfect for it. Oh, okay, I'll do it. So I imagine he just did it, because he was trying to make ends meet at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And Connery said, I realised that a top-class footballer could be over the hill by the age of 30. And I was already 23. I decided to become an actor, and it turned out to be one of my more intelligent moves.
Oh my god. The voice, I just can't.
You've got to do the Sean Connery voice.
Don't you think that that's probably why he wasn't cast in, like, in a wider array of roles? Because his accent was just so thick.
Well, yeah, funnily enough, like he was a film star. Yeah. And film stars, it's kind of like Michael Douglas. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of other, Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Yeah.
They're film stars. They're known for playing a fictionalized themselves in a character,
Yeah.
Not an actual character.
Right.
They're not like, because a lot of people, I have this friend on Facebook.
You have character actors.
Yeah, character actors, like, you see them everywhere and they're playing a different character.
We were just talking the other night, weren't we? Bill Pullman.
Bill Pullman and Bill Paxton, they're character actors.
We were just like, oh, they're in absolutely everything, but
they're not lead. They're not the star.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And
or even if they are, they're not like starring in that. Didn't make them like the sort of A-list actor that like Tom Cruise or Hugh Grant or you know,
Hugh Grant. Yeah, he's kind of like having a bit of a renaissance. I mean, he's known as being Hugh Grant in every film he's ever been in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Michael Douglas, same thing. You know, Sean Connery, same thing.
Yeah.
They just have these like distinctive, like they're cast, and they get like that project gets greenlit. Then you know it's like, oh yeah, he'll be a box office success, and it's like I have a friend on Facebook who works in the film industry, and he said, yeah, projects, you know, I can't think of anyone else in the UK that them saying yes to a film would instantly get the project greenlit. It doesn't matter, you know, it's okay, you know, because sometimes you have to kind of like say, oh, well, Hugh Grant wants to star in it. It's like, oh, well, who else can we get, you know? And the studio will be like, okay, can we put some other big name in there? Or, you know, but with Sean Connery, it was like, oh, you got Sean Connery? Okay. Let's go.
Was he ever, and I'm sure we're skipping ahead from, you know, what the notes that you have.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway.
Because you can.
Was he ever honored for his acting, really, though? Was he ever... He was never, like...
His only Oscar came from The Untouchables.
Oh, yes! Yeah. Okay, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. I forgot about that.
I think he won a BAFTA, I think, or was nominated for a BAFTA for... In the Name of the Rose. I think that was a film he did in the mid-80s, you know... something about In the Name of the Rose. I think it was called that.
Yeah.
I mean, after James Bond, his career kind of just went a little bit, you know, downhill.
Yeah.
He wasn't getting plum roles because he was typecast as James Bond.
Yeah.
Which he hated.
Yeah.
His mate Michael Caine, who he'd known since like 1954, I think, because he met him at some party or something. So but later on they became friends.
Yeah.
He said, Michael Caine says, in the early days.
Oh my God, we're gonna do this now.
Not a lot of people know this, but in the early days, Sean, you wouldn't talk about Bond with him because he didn't want to know about it, you know, because it was like he wanted to be known as an actor, really.
Yeah.
And it's like you'd be walking down the street with him and people go, oh, there's James Bond, and he got upset by it, you know, because it was just kind of like, I'm acting, you know, because when you know, he started, his first film role was as Spike, this like gangster with a speech impediment in No Road Back in 1957.
Oh, yeah.
And then he did a couple of other films, I think, what was it, Hell Drivers, Cyan Field in 1957. Then his first major role was opposite Lana Turner in Another Time and Another Place.
Oh, yeah.
Another Time, Another Place, it was called. And he played some British reporter she had an affair with, you know, and that was pretty big. Then he got cast in Darby O'Gill and the Little People, Walt Disney's, which kind of turned out to be his big break.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't really do that great at the box office and stuff.
We watched that.
We watched it not that long
ago.
ago. And I mean, it's not too bad, but, you know, you can see it's like one of those things that they stick that thing on Disney Plus, you know, that like, oh, this cultural and, you know, depictions are out of date and all that kind of stuff. He played like the opposite Janet Monroe in that, you know.
It was
Michael
a bizarre McBride. Kind of.
It was basically a big stereotype of Irish folklore.
Yeah.
Leprechauns and
he was trying to do an Irish accent.
He kind of tried. He was trying. But his you know, when you know him as Sean Connery, it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently a lot of the film was praised, but, you know, save for Connery, who was just tall, dark, and handsome. Yeah. You know, by critics, you know, he didn't do much. But that's where Dana Broccoli, who was wife of Albert Cubby Broccoli, saw him. And when they were looking for a guy to play this British secret agent,
Ian Fleming's character,
they said, because I think Ian Fleming had said, I want Cary Grant, or I want David Niven, and even Roger Moore at that time was floated, because he was kind of coming up, he was kind of a film star, but he was doing The Saint, so he couldn't, he'd started on The Saint, so he couldn't commit to it.
Yeah.
And Cary Grant was like, nah, I don't want to do it, I don't want to be committed to a film series,
Yeah, yeah.
Because they were planning to make this a film series.
He thought he was too old, too, didn't he?
Cary Grant said, yeah, I'm a bit too old for this now.
Yeah.
You need someone a bit younger.
Yeah.
David Niven, again, he was a bit too old for it, too.
Yeah.
So, apparently it was Dana Broccoli going to Albert, this is the guy we need. This is the guy. And they were a bit like, oh, he's kind of unknown, and and Ian Fleming was like, oh, he's an overgrown stuntman. I'm looking for Commander Bond. I don't want this Scotsman who's. But, Connery fought for it, and he said, I'm going to do, and he didn't really want to be part of it.
He fought for it, and then he resented it later.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, he didn't resent the success of it, but he resented the money he didn't get for it.
Yeah.
That's what ultimately ended his association with the series, was because he felt he wasn't being paid a big enough salary when Dean Martin was making films spoofed off his success. And making a hell of a load of money for it, So by 1966, by You Only Live Twice, he was done with it. He was like, "Oh, Bond mania has finished me off. I'm pulling out. I'm not doing any more."
Yeah.
And find someone else, and they did. They found an Australian model for one movie, and then he briefly returned to it because they pretty much had to pay him $1 million to get him back, which was like a big fee back then.
It was just one more film, wasn't it?
Yeah, for Eon, for the Broccolis and everything. Yeah, it was one more film, and that was it. He was done then. And then he did a lot of good roles. I mean, for a film star, you expect everything. I mean, he didn't really have box office hits until, especially around the late 70s and early 80s, he was not having box office hits. He was starring in stuff like The First Great Train Robbery, which I've seen on TV, and The Man Who Would Be King. We watched that.
Yeah.
First Great Train Robbery I've seen on TV. It's pretty good, But, and he was in Outlander, this science fiction kind of thing. That was because, they were making a lot of like that stuff because of Star Wars in the late 70s, early 80s. And they weren't really making him any money, and so when the legal loophole allowed Kevin McClory to make Never Say Never Again, he managed to convince Sean to come back, because it was like, this is going to be a good payday.
Yeah.
Because you've got to come back to James Bond.
If you guys have never seen Never Say Never Again,
it's a remake of an earlier James Bond film that he starred in,
and he uses the name James Bond.
Yeah, he uses the name James Bond. It's not
like it's not an official James Bond.
It's not an official Eon James Bond. There's no.
Which is
production.
So weird. I don't think anything like that has ever been done anywhere ever in the rest of history. I mean, can you imagine? Making another Harry Potter film and getting Daniel Radcliffe, and he plays Harry Potter, but it's not
nothing to do with Warner Brothers or J.K. Rowling or anything. It's just like, can you imagine them getting to do? Yeah, that would be actually quite hilarious.
It's never ever been
Harry Potter. A seasoned wizard.
Yeah, it's never been done, has it?
It's never really been done. I mean, they did a spoof.
It's kind of like really, really crazy when you think about it.
They did a spoof of James Bond in 1967 with David Niven and Peter Sellers, and Ursula Andress, who was in Sean Connery's first Bond film, Dr. No, and a few other people. And it was a spoof of Casino Royale, but it was terrible because it was all disjointed. It was like this crazy. It was like an acid trip. And then David Niven was James Bond, Peter Sellers was James Bond, and there was like several directors and everything attached to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, but Never Say Never Again was just a straight remake of Thunderball. It had Kim Basinger in it.
Mm-hmm.
One of her very early roles.
Yeah.
And he was like, Connery, I think he was in his he was about 53 then. So he was coming back as this old, and then they put him in freaking so much makeup and put a toupee. He didn't want to wear the toupee.
Yeah.
He didn't want to wear the makeup. He wanted to like be a kind of an older, rugged Bond, but they were like, nah, you got to put the toupee on. You got to be like it was back then, you know?
Yeah.
And that went head to head with Octopussy at the box office, which was starring Roger Moore as the official Bond, you know? And of course, that was it for him with James Bond. That was his final role. It wasn't bad. It was just a straight remake of Thunderball, really, you know, just kind of updated a bit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you could watch that one first and then Never Say Never Again.
And it would be, you know, just 20 years between, you know. But yeah, then he had like The Highlander and which was kind of like, it's a cult classic that now. But then The Untouchables came along, and that's kind of what restarted his...
The Untouchables, I think, is the first thing I ever saw him in, because I didn't really get into James Bond until I met you, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, actually, I had seen it on, obviously. My grandpa watched it, but I never sat and watched it. But The Untouchables, that was like right in my lane. You know, that was the kind of thing that I really like. And
De Niro played Capone in it, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They wanted to get Bob Hoskins for it, I think, and people were like, Bob Hoskins would have been perfect as Al Capone. He looks exactly like him.
That's funny.
And, you know, he did you thought Bob Hoskins was American anyway, so he was like doing that kind of thing. But they got De Niro. I mean, De Niro does a great job anyway. I mean, De Niro's born to play those roles. Kevin Costner in it, and he was an Irish beat cop.
Yeah.
Sean Connery, Malone.
Yeah.
And he gets killed in it, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Spoiler
he does.
alert. I mean, people have...
Yeah, he does. But, you know, the funny thing is I was quite young when I saw it for the first time. And I just thought, wow, he's an old man. But I thought he's really gorgeous. He's a really attractive old man. And it probably helped that, like, my mom and grandma and whoever else were there were like, yeah, Sean Connery. You know?
Sean Connery, yeah.
But, yeah, I remember... you know, if I don't know if you guys know, but Dominic knows I have a thing for little old men. So it's just like he was like
Connery was never a little old man. I mean, he was always quite tall. I mean, you know, you shrink as you get older. I think he retained his height.
But you know, he had the white hair already, the white
white
beard and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and I'm a kid, so I'm like, oh, he's a little old man to me, you know. And I was just like completely in love and completely devastated when he got killed. It was just like, oh, no. But he was great in that role. Yeah,
and it got him an Oscar for supporting actor.
That's good, yeah.
Then a couple of years later, I mean, he started doing those kind of films, and it was kind of like that was his way back into box office success. He did Presidio.
Oh, no, you know what? Sorry to interrupt you. I just remembered the actual first thing I ever saw him in. It was not The Untouchables. It was him it was just a clip. Just a little tiny second.
I know what you're going to say, too.
Because I absolutely loved Robin Hood with Kevin Costner. And I watched that over and over and over and over as a kid. And he's King Richard at the very end of that. Yeah. Literally.
It was a cameo. It was out of nowhere.
Yeah, literally.
He wasn't even credited for it.
So and I don't know which one was filmed first, but I definitely saw Robin Hood before I saw The Untouchables.
Robin Hood was filmed after it.
It was filmed after. Yeah. Okay, so that's how they got him.
He was great.
Kevin Costner was like, come on, come be King Richard.
Yeah, I mean, Connery was great at playing kings. I think he played the king in Time Bandits, which was in 1981.
He should have. Oh, that's...
He played King... Oh, was it King Arthur? I think in First Night with Richard Gere, which was a flop in the mid-90s. Yeah. But yeah, he was great at playing those kind of roles, you know, as he got older. It was like, yeah, he looked the part. If he hadn't retired in 2003 after League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I think he could have been in Game of Thrones. He could have been in one of these.
He would have been great in Game of Thrones. I thought for a second you were going to say Harry Potter, like,
Harry Potter too.
No, he couldn't have been Dumbledore. He was too, like...
He could have been he
was too, like, big and burly.
He was actually apparently approached to be Gandalf in Lord of the Rings.
Really?
Yeah.
I just don't know.
But he turned it down because he didn't understand the script.
No,
he didn't live in anyone's fantasy world or sci-fi world. Well, I mean, he did do some sci-fi films in the early 80s.
He was the voice of Dragonheart, wasn't he? That film Dragonheart.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
I mean, Highlander was kind of a fantasy film too. But it was kind of the thing. But yeah, he didn't understand the role. So, but it was possibly not one of his more shrewder moves, because he could have earned us so much money from the Lord of the Rings. I mean, he could have been like Alec Guinness with Star Wars. He could have negotiated the box office and percentages and all that, which I think they offered him. I think Peter Jackson was like, yeah, if you're Gandalf in this, then yeah. But he wanted to retire because there's the idiots and League of Extraordinary...
the idiots.
The idiots making films in Hollywood today, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, he fell out with the director on that. It's not a bad film, but yeah, it's I wish he did. I mean, he did the voice of Sir Billy the Vet in 2012 for like an animated Scottish film, which I don't think really did much.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the only thing he did after his official retirement from films.
Yeah, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I saw it, and I mean, it's not too bad, but it's not great either. Shane West was in it. I can't remember who else now, actually. But yeah, before, he was in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Yeah.
But he was he also did around that Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Oh, yes.
He was in The Hunt for Red October, The Rock, which was basically him playing Bond again.
Oh, he was in Finding Forrester, which was one of...
Forrester, which was one of our first...
one of our first dates.
Because I kept quoting the film, punch the quiche, for God's sake.
And I was just like, what in God's
name?
And
I kept saying that, it's like, you're the man now, dog.
And so, God, and so Dominic, living in Britain, has this idea. Actually, I think we'd already had one Skype date where we watched a movie together, but
it was Home Alone.
He's
for
like,
anyone wondering.
Go to Blockbuster. This tells you guys how old we are. Go to Blockbuster, or how long we've been together anyway. Go to Blockbuster and rent Finding Forrester, and we're gonna watch this together. And I was just like, oh, what? Finding Forrester?
What is this about?
So I went to Blockbuster. The guy at Blockbuster was literally like, why are you renting this old movie?
Did he?
I can't remember what he said now.
He says, "Oh, this is a bit of an old movie."
Yeah,
because it's from 2000. I think it was one of his last films.
He was just definitely like, "What? Why are you renting this?" And it's not like it was a really popular film. I think that was more. It was just so random to him.
It was. I don't think it was a box office success like the Rock and Entrapment. Yeah. Entrapment with Catherine Zeta-Jones. I think that was his final huge. I mean, but maybe I don't know. I don't even know if that was a box office success actually. Maybe The Rock was. I know that he starred in The Avengers with Ralph Fiennes in 1998, but that was kind of a terrible film. According to everyone who's a fan of The Avengers, is like, yeah, that's a terrible film.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we're talking about his career. Really, he didn't have a whole lot of really successful films, did he?
But he was in a lot of stuff. Yeah, he was in Family Business with Dustin Hoffman and Matthew Broderick. Actually, that's kind of it's like a crime thrillers. I mean, he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in a lot of films that were just, it was just kind of the projects got greenlit, but they didn't necessarily get box office success.
Yeah. I wonder why, because you never really heard anybody saying, oh, well, he's not that great of an actor or anything like that. So
I mean, there's It's just because I think it was just purely because of the James Bond thing.
Just and maybe the types of films, you know,
the types of films. Yeah, they were just like
middle of the road type of films. Like he just never got any like really big roles. Well, you said he was up for Lord of the Rings, and that was kind of.
He turned it down.
You can't blame somebody. Like, how are they going to play a part if they're not understanding really what is
going on?
Yeah, I
mean, he read the script and he just didn't understand it. It was just too crazy, you know. But with Connery, I mean, his box office successes came with like action roles where he was beating the crap out of someone.
Aww.
And I mean that's his hard man prowess right there. Because I mean, when in Edinburgh he was targeted by the Valdor gang.
Okay.
And they were kind of like this violent gang on the city streets of Edinburgh, you know. And they targeted him, and you know, he fought them off every time, like 4 or 5 men by himself, you know.
Yeah.
And so they came to respect him. Then there was the time in another place on the set when Lana Turner's then boyfriend Johnny Stompanato, who was a gangster in L.A. I think L.A. Confidential and all that talks about Mickey Cohen and all that.
Oh yeah.
You know, he came to the set in London and he was like jealous of her, and he thought Connery and her were having an affair, which they probably were. And he came to the set and he was like waving a gun in Connery's face, and Connery disarmed him and punched him, and you know, he ran off the set. You know, this little gangster guy.
Gangster guy.
And you know, and apparently Connery had to lay low for a while because he thought, oh yeah, you know, because he received death threats and stuff. You know, oh, we're coming to get you.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, that all prepared him for his most famous role, I think, you know. So, you know, it's like that gives him a little bit of authenticity right there, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and that's why, and that is why the franchise is still here today with Daniel Craig, is because of what he did.
So, yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. We're way over time.
We're way over time. We are.
We're going to leave you here. If you guys have not entered the giveaway, then be sure you do that. It's posted on all of our social media sites. It's the picture of all the Texas food and
all
stuff
the
like
Texas
that.
food.
And it says giveaway across the top. And it tells you down in the post how to enter. So if you have not entered, you have until November 10th, which is next Tuesday, to enter.
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, and then oh my gosh. And then we'll be announcing the winner on our Thursday podcast. So November 12th, Thursday, not this Thursday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's coming quick. Be sure you get that entry in. I don't know what I was going to say there, but
get whatever you can in. Get whatever you can in there.
Thank you for listening. As always, we appreciate your support, and we will talk to you next time. Aye.
Goodbye.
Bye.